Let's turn next to Nat Keohane, President at the Center for Climate and Energy Solutions. He served in the White House as Special Assistant to President Obama for Energy and Environment. Thank you very much indeed, Nat, for joining me. I guess I'm asking the same question again and again because it's such an important one. You know, your country is crammed with brilliant scientists and brilliant, universities, people who have got all the kit to understand. In fact, we get a lot of our understanding of climate science from Americans and from the American scientific community. And yet the American political community gets away year after year with saying this is all a hoax, it's not happening, it's not true, and laughing at it. Is there going to be a turning point, do you think? Do you think something like what's happening in Los Angeles is going to make the American political system take a little look at itself in the mirror?
Well, first of all, thanks very much for having me on. And obviously the context for this with the devastation caused by the fires, and we heard from the person who's living in LA, that's really terrible. But I do think, to your point, that the fires in LA are part of a drumbeat that we're seeing in the US, we're seeing around the world, of increasingly devastating impacts from climate change. In the U.S., we saw this in the fall with Hurricane Helene and Milton, which devastated the Southeast, the city of Asheville in North Carolina, which was a haven, a climate haven, because it's located so far inland, was devastated by flooding due to climate-related impacts of storms. So I think people see that in the U.S., they see it happening around the world, the floods in Spain, the heat waves in Europe last summer. And I think, as Jill Stein said, if you ask the American public, an overwhelming majority believe that climate change is happening. They believe global warming is happening. It's being driven by humans, and they're seeing those consequences where they live more and more. And I think that is beginning to really, or that has changed the political conversation. But climate is polarized, just like almost everything is right now in American politics. On the Democratic side, you have overwhelming majorities of Democratic voters who say this is a top priority. This is not this current last cycle, but in 2020, Joe Biden was elected in part on the strength of his commitments on climate change. So you have a Democratic Party that sees this, where the voters see this as a priority. I think many of the voters on the Republican side also understand the importance of climate change. It's the leadership in the Republican Party. Last thing I just want to say quickly, I know you'll have more questions. It's not everybody in the Republican Party, even on the political side. So we're an organization that looks to work with folks in both parties. There are Republican members of Congress who understand the importance of climate, but the leadership, and certainly Donald Trump, is not among them.
Well, you mentioned the two crucial words there. I don't want to personalize things, but you can't get away from what Donald Trump was saying. For instance, in his press conference only, I think yesterday, when he was mocking windmills and saying they're killing wildlife, they're killing whales, they litter all over the place, down with windmills. Now, coming from a part of the globe, Europe, where windmills are now everywhere, and it's considered to be an essential part of our response to climate change, that's worrying. How concerned are you when you listen to Donald Trump's rhetoric and his threats, really, when it comes to non-fossil fuel energy?
Well, look, I think the first thing to understand is that we've made an incredible amount of progress in the U.S. over the past few years, and even the past decade. If you look at the past few years, the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, which sounds like it would be something to reduce inflation, but it was actually the biggest climate change investment bill that's ever been passed. And so if you look at what's been happening in Congress, if you look at what's happening on the ground, the investments that are going into windmills, to solar panels, but to other zero carbon power, to low carbon industry, to green industry, and so on. There are lots of windmills in the U.S. as well, right? So if you look at what's happening on the ground, there's been a huge amount of progress. The amount of power and electricity coming from zero carbon sources is going up. Overall emissions are going down. So there's a lot to build on. I think the challenge is, as you say, the political leadership in the Republican Party right now is not, is going in the wrong direction. So what we need to do is work with the folks in the Republican Party, also in the Democratic Party, to make the case, which we can, that action on climate is good for the economy, it's good for jobs. We're beginning to see that happen already. We're beginning to see that take hold. And so I'm not optimistic about Donald Trump, but I am optimistic about the direction that the conversation in America is going, even in Washington, D.C.
Yeah. Good for you. I like to end these conversations not in a mood of kind of forehead clutching despair. Nat Keohane, thank you very much indeed for talking to me.